Hi friends, today we're going to talk about solving by square root property. Now, this is a method that we're going to use when we are solving a quadratic in a very specific situation. It's when we have something raised to the second power equals a number. Now that looks very mysterious, so I want to write up a couple ways it could look. So it might look like x squared equals 12, okay? Or it could look like x plus 1 squared equals 5. Or sometimes it would look like x minus 2 squared minus 3 equals 0. So those are three different ways we could see it. Notice that in each we have something squared equals a number. Now on this last one, x minus 2 squared minus 3 equals 0. That one's really close. Notice if we rewrite it as x minus 2 squared equals 3, okay, now we've got something squared equals a number. Notice that there is not an x term in these. We just have something squared. And it might be just an x, or it could be an x plus 1, or some other binomial. All right, let me take a short detour, and let's just talk about inverses, or opposites. So when we think about opposite operations, we might think about adding 3 and subtracting 3. Those are opposites. Multiplying by 1/2, and multiplying by 2. Those are opposites. We use the opposite to undo an operation. So let's think back. If I had an equation that looked like 2x plus 3 equals 0, we would use inverses or opposites to solve this. And I know you can do this, but walk with me through it anyway. We would subtract 3 to undo the adding 3. So that would leave me with 2x equals negative 3. And then we would divide by 2 or multiply by 1/2 to undo multiplying by 2. And we would get x is equal to negative 3 over 2. That's familiar, right? Well, I want to point out something else. If we think about a square root and raising to the second power, these are also opposites. Okay? So if I have the square root of x squared, this is just going to give me x. Same as if I have 1/2 times 2x, those opposites come together, cancel each other out, and we're just left with x. All right, so square root of x squared equals x. And this piece of information is going to be super important for square root property. Okay, let's look at an example. So if I had x squared equal 50, and we are asked to solve this, I'm first going to notice that I have something squared equal to a number. So square root property is going to be my best way to approach that. Now I've gotten halfway through my board and I haven't even told you what square root property does, so let me do that now. It says I can take the square root of both sides of this equation. On the left-hand side, it's going to undo that x squared. It's going to leave me with x. Now, here's the most important part, and it's the part people miss the most often. If I add a square root to an equation, I also have to add a plus minus. So here's what that looks like. When I take the square root of both sides of this equation, so square root of x squared equals square root of 50, I have to add a plus and minus on the outside of square root of 50. I sometimes think of this as if I brought the square root to the party, I also have to bring a plus minus. All right, so let's simplify this. Square root of x squared, as we said, is just x. And then on the right-hand side, I have positive and negative square root of 50. And even though that positive and negative looks a little silly, it's okay. We can leave it like that, except for square root of 50 isn't quite simplified yet. So let's go ahead and simplify it. This would be positive and negative square root of 25 times 2, which would be positive and negative. Whoop, hold on. Small error. All right, it's fixed now. Positive and negative 5 square root of 2. So my answer would be x equals positive and negative 5 square root of 2. Now, some computer systems will require you to split this up into 2 answers. If so, that's totally fine. This could be written as 5 square root of 2, comma, negative 5 square root of 2. But these two mean the exact same thing. And if you're writing it out on paper to turn in, often the positive and negative is just fine. Okay, so this is the method that we use. We want to isolate the squared thing on one side and the number on the other, take the square root of both sides, and simplify. So let's look at another one. All right, let's do x minus 1 squared equals 16. Okay, so I have something squared on one side, number on the other. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I'm going to write my square root of both sides, and I'm going to immediately add that plus and minus so I don't forget it. On the left-hand side, the square root of x minus 1 squared is just going to be x minus 1. On the right-hand side, I have that positive and negative, but we know that square root of 16 is just 4. So I'm going to simplify that and just write it as plus and minus 4. Now this looks a little silly. That's okay. We're just going to let it look a little silly for now. I still need to solve it for x. So in order to do that, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I get x equals on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, it looks like plus and minus 4 plus 1. I'm going to rewrite this in the opposite order, 1 plus or minus 4. We generally sandwich that positive and negative in between two numbers, just a convention. All right, so x is equal to 1 plus or minus 4. We're not quite done yet. This would be two answers, 1 plus 4 and 1 minus 4. And we can evaluate each of those. 1 plus 4 is 5, and 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So my final answer would be x is equal to 5, comma, negative 3. Okay. Let's see which one I want to do next. Well, let's do we'll do one like this third one I put up here. So this is going to be parentheses x minus 2 squared is equal to minus 3 equals 0. So we will write it in the form that needs a little bit of help. So x minus 2 squared minus 3 equals 0. Remember that the first thing I need is something squared equals a number. So we are going to add 3 to both sides. So I have x minus 2 squared is equal to 3. Let's take the square root of both sides. When I take the square root of 3, I'm going to add that positive and negative on the outside. So square root of x minus 2 squared is just x minus 2. So x minus 2 is equal to positive and negative square root of 3. Almost done. We still need to solve for x by adding 2 to both sides. And I get x is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 3. Now, that looks like a silly number, but it is a correct answer. Some computer systems will ask you to split it into 2, just like up here with the 5 square root of 2 and the negative 5 square root of 2. If so, we would write that as 2 plus square root of 3, comma, 2 minus the square root of 3. Okay. Keep an eye out for this form, because if you have a quadratic equation to solve in the form something squared equals a number, square root property is a really straightforward way to solve that question. It doesn't work all the time, but when it does, it's pretty quick. My last video on solving quadratics will be quadratic formula, so stay tuned for that one.